DJ Cuppy's ex-fiancé speaks. She didn't want Nigerian staff. I didn't sign an NDA. Close quote. Ha! This one sweet me small. Not because of drama, but because it's such a clear example of emotional immaturity dressed up as confidence. So DJ Cuppy's ex-fiancé Ryan Taylor has now entered his microphone ministry. He went on the latter's podcast to talk about his relationship with her, not to praise her, not to reflect privately, but to make certain claims that, if you listen carefully, it says more about him than about her. He said, and I quote, "Is it mad if I told you she didn't like people from our own country? She didn't come into my business." No, he said she'd come into my business and she didn't want me to have a fellow country people as staff. Would walk in the mall and people would run from their counters to ask for money. Now he thinks we're broke. He thinks we're all poor people, by the way. Now, before we break that down, let's remember who we're talking about here. We're talking about DJ Cuppy, a billionaire's daughter. Yes, we're talking about a woman who has hustled her way into her own identity. She's not just Femi Otedola's daughter anymore. She's built her name, her career, a public image that mixes privilege with pressure. So when I heard Ryan say that line, she didn't like people from her country, I saw a racist. I paused because there's something deeper going on here, okay? So before I jump into the racism, see, it's one thing to describe your experience in a relationship. It's another thing entirely to sit on a podcast and casually attempt to shape the world's opinion of your ex, especially a woman who never went online to speak against you. That's not closure. That's ego looking for sympathy. Now, let's call it what it is. A man speaking publicly about his ex like that is not real. It's not honest. It's emotional weakness. It's tell me you're still hurt, a butt hurt, without telling me you're still hurt. He might think he's giving people insight, but what he's really doing is revealing how much space she still occupies in his mind. Because once if you've truly moved on, right, you stop trying to edit their image for the world. You stop needing the last word. Now, about the substance of what he said. If Cuppy truly expressed discomfort around being surrounded by his fellow Nigerians, that's not something to mock. That's something to understand. Cuppy has lived her life under the microscope, every opinion turned into headlines, and when you grow up like that, sometimes you build walls even around your own community, not because you hate your own people, but because you're tired of being used by them. We've all seen it before. When you have privilege or visibility, some people start seeing you as what they can get from you. Maybe that's what she was reacting to. Maybe her guard was up. Maybe she didn't know how to separate opportunism from genuine care. That's a human flaw, not a national insult, okay? So when Ryan says people would run up asking for money, that tells me she probably associated those moments with pressure and expectation. And when she told him not to hire her country people, maybe she was saying, I've been burnt before, be careful. But of course, it's misinterpreted the whole thing now because it's butthurt. Still, let's be fair to Ryan. We don't know her full reasoning, but what we do know right now is that there's context. And on the podcast, months after the breakup, that's not love talking about it. It's immaturity. Now let's zoom out for a second. This is a man who was engaged to one of the most famous women in Africa. They were posting videos, laughing, traveling, giving people couple goals. The world thought they were inseparable, not me, okay? But then, like a lot of public relationships, it fell apart. And instead of leaving quietly, my guy went on air to explain, tired. He said, everything happens for a reason, no regrets, lesson learned. But that phrase, lesson learned, what do you mean? I've learned that when someone says lesson learned, it doesn't always mean that, okay? It means they've learned some stupid stuff, because true lessons don't require microphones. They show up in your maturity, not your monologues. Ryan says he didn't sign an NDA, meaning legally he can talk about whatever he wants. He has a right. He's talking about rights, a grown man. And yes, he can. But freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reflection or consequence. Just because you can speak doesn't mean you should, especially when the person you're speaking about isn't defending themselves. That's just immaturity. And that's the core of today's lessons. When men go public to dissect their exes, they're not showcasing strength. They're revealing a lack of emotional discipline. A real man doesn't weaponize a woman's vulnerability just because the relationship didn't end on its terms. It's vice versa too. Let me tell you something. One of the purest forms of masculine power is silence. The ability to know something about someone, to know their flaws, their fears, their private moments, and still choose not to broadcast it. That's what separates leaders from loud boys. Ryan might think he's telling his side of the story, but what he's actually telling us is how much work he still needs to do on himself. Because, let's be honest, if you're healed, you don't sit down talking about who your ex didn't want in her staff. You're too busy building your new life, too busy loving your new peace, too busy minding your own new purpose. Now, don't get me wrong, DJ Cuppy isn't perfect either. I talked about this before. She's human. And like many high-achieving women, she's probably struggled with vulnerability, control, and maybe even overprotection. When you're constantly in a world where everyone expects something from you, it's easy to become guarded. But guarded doesn't mean guilty. And it definitely doesn't justify being dragged on a podcast for clout. And this is the power dynamics piece. When a man uses public platforms to paint his ex in a certain light, especially a woman with influence, that's not storytelling. That's subtle image control. It's a way of saying, I couldn't control her in private, so I'll control how people see her in public. It's controlling behavior. It's bad behavior. That's not masculine energy. That's insecurity in a suit or whatever I was wearing. And to every man watching this, here's your reminder. When a relationship ends, your character starts. That's the test, the shit test. Because breakups reveal whether your love was real or just conditional on access. If you can't speak respectfully about someone you once called my person, then what was all that I love you about? You're not a man of your words. Ryan's message could have been simple. It didn't work. I wish her well. That's it. That shows masculinity. That's grace. That's prestige. But instead, he chose to talk about her alleged dislike for Nigerians, about mall encounters, about not signing DNAs, like he's the hero of a breakup Nollywood movie. No, sir. You're not the hero. You're the ex who is still rehearsing his pain in public. In fact, you're the one that hates Nigerians. And people like you should stay away from our daughters. And for everyone listening, let this be your takeaway. The need to speak negatively about someone who's no longer in your life usually means that person still controls your emotions. It's not about truth. It's about unresolved ego. If you're really over them, you stop talking. You stop proving. You stop explaining. Explain. Because peace doesn't explain itself. It just exists. DJ Cuppy may have had her own flaws, but she's moved on. She's living her life, staying quiet, focusing on her growth. That's the part people should pay attention to. But because silence after chaos isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So here's my prestige take. A man who still talks about his ex is a man who is still harboring her energy. Emotional maturity means learning to release without resentment. Yeah, it's easier said than done. You don't have to be the villain, but you also don't need to audition for the role of victim. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do or you can say is nothing at all. And by the way, when you cross certain dimensions in relationships, this is to the copies, race, religion, age gap, crisis, will be loud once the breakup happens. It requires a lot of emotional intelligence because after the breakup, that's when people's capacity for nuance shows. What used to be cultural difference during love can quickly turn into subtle prejudice, racism during pain, and that's what you're seeing here. Honestly, that's how I see it. And Ryan is exposing is unconscious racist bias. He didn't even realize he had when things were sweet. Now it's messy, and it's teaching us why awareness is key before mixing words you don't fully understand. So let me leave you with this. When love ends, do you think sharing your truth publicly is healing? Or is it just another way of keeping the wound open? I'll be right back.
This is Ola, man of Prestige, your favorite relationship and marriage coach. If you enjoyed this, smash that like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Be a part of the Prestige family. My wife Lola and I have written 2 powerful books, Get My Marriage Back and Number One Red Flag, yours free at manofprestige.com. For personal coaching, send me a WhatsApp request for consultation to +1 732 305 8577. Stay tuned for more. Your journey to love and prestige starts here.